So just going back into something you spoke about there, we have the breath, and like you say, breath control is often referred to as pranayama, but the two things are slightly different. So
Yes.
pranayama is about working with prana, which sometimes gets confused with breath, doesn't it? Because breath and prana are intimately linked, but they're not one and the same, are they?
We breathe in order to access the prana.
Mm-hmm.
See, Jesus said, man does not live by bread alone. You could also substitute the word bread for breath. Man does not live by breath alone.
Mm-hmm.
It's the energy contained within the breath. Sure, we've got oxygen coming in, carbon dioxide and water vapor coming out. So there's a biochemical process of breathing. There's an anatomical process, but there's also an energetic process.
Mm.
And a simple thing you can do is check the swara.
Mm-hmm.
Which nostril is more dominant? Left swara or right swara? Now, throughout the day, that swara means flow.
Mm-hmm.
So in the body, nadi also means flow. It doesn't mean the channel or the pathway. People often refer to a nadi as a pathway. That's incorrect.
Ah.
It's flow of energy within that pathway.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's in the body, it's called nadi. If it's in the breath, it's called swara. Swara means flow. So your swara alternates between left nostril and right nostril. You can consciously manipulate that flow by using forced unilateral nostril breathing, that's the medical terminology for it, to actually alter energy systems within the body. You can affect sympathetic or parasympathetic nervous activity.
Mm-hmm.
You can do different rates of breathing. So you can change the breath, but if your focus is on the energy that you're shifting within the body and within the mind, then it's pranayama. Mm-hmm. If you're simply breathing as a technique, it's not pranayama. Precursor.
Right, okay. So say we were doing breath retention, so inhaling for 4, pausing for 4, exhaling for 4, pausing, inhaling. Would you call that breath control, or would you call that pranayama?
It's a breath control, and it does have an effect on pranayama.
Yeah.
But what are you doing? Why are you doing it? If you're doing it as a technique in a class, it's simply a technique. It's a breath control. Mm-hmm. If you're doing it in order to effect a specific shift in energy and maybe consciousness awareness, and you are actually doing that on purpose, then the technique is... the technique allows you to practice the pranayama. Mm. It's like when people do an asana. Many people call the asana yoga. Come to a yoga class, and this is the most common fallacy in the West. Mm-hmm. People mistake yoga for asana. Mm-hmm. So asana means seat. So there's the first misconception. Asana means seat. So any seated position is an asana. In fact, you can call a chair or a cushion an asana because you sit in it or on it. But standing poses, Surya Namaskar, all the bending and twisting, that's not the yoga. The yoga is what you're doing while you are doing the bending and twisting. The bending and the twisting facilitates a process whereby you can practice the yoga. The yoga, word yoga, means to bring together, to balance, to join. And I gave you a written summary. I think you've put it on the yoga lunchbox already.
Yes,
where I talked about the yoke joining the two animals. Mm-hmm. So yoga is not the piece of wood that joins the animals. Yoga is the process of balancing the two animals, the energy of the animals, by use of the yoke. So yoga is what happens whilst we are practicing the asana. The asana gives us an opportunity to practice mind-body connection. Without the mindfulness, without the mind-body connection, it's just exercise masquerading as yoga. It's the same with pranayama. If you're doing a breathing technique, there is going to be some benefit in awareness, in focus. There's a meditative component to it. But unless you are doing it with awareness, with a desire for a specific outcome, and you know the outcome, and you can actually measure and participate in that outcome on purpose, then it's not pranayama. Pranayama happens after you learn the technique. So it's the subtle.
Yeah,
the
right.
real yoga is subtle.
So you almost have to have that conscious intention. while doing the breath control that makes it then pranayama, because you've got the conscious intention to work with the prana in a specific way using the breath as your tool.
Exactly, because think back to the animals, the two animals joined by the yoke. Now it could be a plough or a cart. Now who's in charge of those animals? You just let them loose, they'll go away and graze, they'll do nothing. So the person on the cart or behind the plough with the reins, that represents the consciousness in this analogy. Without consciousness, the whole system is just a bunch of bolts and nuts and bits of wood. So without conscious awareness, the bending and twisting or the breathing technique is nothing really. You still get some benefits, but it's all about the conscious awareness. It's the connection of consciousness to body, the awareness of consciousness to mind and thought. That's where the yoga is. That's what yoga really is.
So I've heard it said sometimes that pranayama is dangerous, that until you really know what you're doing or you're at a certain stage, that it's dangerous to use, to practice pranayama. Is that so, or what's your understanding?
It could be so. Let me take an example of somebody who's stressed at work, hypertensive, perhaps they've got some undiagnosed heart issues through stress, diet, things like that. They go to their doctor's uninformed, but reads the latest magazines that says yoga's good for you. So they say, go and practice some yoga, I think it'll be good for you. So they look in the phone book and they look up, and I don't really want to mention names because I don't want to offend people, but they look up in the yellow pages and they find the local yoga teacher, and it happens to be upstairs above a gym, for example. The room's all hot, everyone's sweaty, and they're doing this powerful kind of stretching and thoracic breathing. And this particular person may have a negative outcome because, as we detected earlier in the interview about the effect of certain breathing styles, particularly consistent thoracic breathing, can have on a person's cardiac output, it could actually exacerbate their high blood pressure. It could exacerbate their anxiety and tension. Now, there could be some other factors because the class could continue and then you have a lay down and you have a relaxation. There could be a meditative component. And don't forget also that exercise is good for you. If that person just went for a walk or a jog or something, they'd get some good benefits from the exercise. So back to your original question, is pranayama dangerous? The answer is quite possibly, but not necessarily.
Right.
Again, it comes down to knowledge of self, knowledge of the technique, and why am I doing this technique? Is it because the teacher read it in a book and it's the latest thing they've found out and so that's what they're teaching? Or is the technique being applied specifically to that person for a specific outcome? You see, I don't teach classes anymore. The only classes I teach are at Monash Medical School. I teach sometimes what I call a master class, and that's for yoga teachers only as professional development. But for general public, I only see them one-on-one because all of my techniques are tailored specifically to the individual.
So you're coming to New Zealand to do a variety of things. You're going on a tour, delivering a workshop, etc. So how are you going to be working with people on this tour?
Okay, so what I'll be doing is talking generically, giving presentations to different people. There's professional people, there's academic people, there's public people, and more yoga people. So there's different audiences I'll be speaking to. So I'll be pitching my talks to, at different levels. But the type of information that I'll be giving is more generic rather than specific. And quite often people put their hand up in a seminar and say, I've got this issue and, or I've got a friend with this. I try not to give second and third hand answers or consult by proxy. So what I tend to do is offer private consultations. So there'll be times where people can come and see me for one-on-one for whatever reasons. They might have health reasons, they might want some mentoring, they might want to learn more about whatever it is that they're teaching or learning. So the best thing that I can offer is those one-on-ones if people want specific information. So the talks will be generic and the consults are specific.
Awesome. So if there was one thing that you wish people knew about breathing and its impact on us, or pranayama and its impact on us, What would that
Okay, the
be?
one thing that people should remember is to keep breathing. Without breathing, it ceases to exist in this world. So it's important to keep breathing. Second most important thing is use the nose for breathing. Nose warms, wets, and filters the air. If you breathe through the mouth, not only do you get dirty sort of air coming in, but you're also prone to more upper respiratory tract infections. But also, there are certain techniques out there masquerading as yoga where you're breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. They use this in Pilates a lot on the mat. Now, in the Pilates class, doing this on the mat whilst you're doing a Pilates course or that Pilates technique is absolutely pertinent to what they're doing. It focuses and it actually accentuates the movement and contraction of the core muscles. But what people mistakenly do then is go to a yoga class and they're doing Tadasana or something and they're breathing in through the nose and then doing a pursed lip exhale. Mm-hmm. So not only is that inappropriate for that particular technique, it also means that you're missing out on the reciprocal movement of the cilia in the nostrils. When you're breathing in and out, you are affecting nasal airflow patterns within the nostrils. So it's like a pendulum. So if you're always breathing in and then out, you've only got a one-way pendulum movement. Mm-hmm. And there's a neurological effect as a consequence. See, most people don't look at that because they haven't looked at the neurological implications or connections between nose and brain and heart. Mm. This is what I do, you know. Yeah. I'm out there on a limb, studying all the strange, weird stuff that goes on inside.
Yeah, and I can see how this would be fascinating and take many years and decades of study to... There's so much to know, isn't there?
Well, I'm still going. I've been at it for, 30 years now, 20 years academically, and, well, more than 30 years. I'm showing my age. It's probably getting down to about 40 years now. Yeah, a long time. So I'm still learning more and more. And I'm teaching more and more because my aim is to bring this awareness to the yoga teachers who don't already think that they know everything, because there's a lot to learn. And, I just put it out there like a smorgasbord and say, look, if you have a technique that's your favorite and you are teaching it and this is part of your style, then have you considered this? Because all the techniques are valid. I'm not saying you shouldn't breathe a certain way. The problem is if the yoga teacher says this is correct breathing and this is the only way to breathe, then that is an absolutely clear indication that they've got no idea what they're talking about. They read it in a book and they're just passing on Chinese whispers, you know. And that technique may be valid for some people for some of the time. But there are so many different ways to breathe and they all have different outcomes, each of which are equally valid for different people, for different outcomes. It's like going to a doctor and the doctor says, yes, drugs are good for you, you know, which is a blanket statement. And then you say, yes, but which drugs? Which drugs do I need? Or herbs or food, you know. Yeah. If you go back to the garden, you say, which herbs shall I pick today? Well, if you're making a salad, certain herbs go in there. If you're cooking something, different herbs go in that. So whilst all herbs can be good for you, I wouldn't recommend taking Damiana, for example. It's a wonderful herb. It can be medicinal for certain people's heart problems, but if you generally take Damiana, you could kill yourself.
It's getting specific, isn't it? Knowing exactly what's required for each person depending on where they're at right now.
Exactly.
Well, thank you for sharing this. It's been lovely to talk to you.
You're most welcome.